Today's the day that I'm giving you our 2025 National Home Price Appreciation Forecast, and before we're done here, you'll get the exact percent number that I expect existing single-family home values to increase by or decrease by next year. It's the fourth straight year that I'm doing this, and now a lot of people make whimsical predictions.
What?
But you'll get something that you rarely, if ever, get today: accountability, because you'll also see how well my forecasts have actually performed each of the past 3 years. I mean, sheesh, don't you wish everyone followed up on the prediction that they made? Instead, it's kind of like this. You know, it gets lightning rod attention when they say home prices are going to crash. It's going to be worse than 2008. Some time passes, well, similar to 2008. Then, oh, we never said it would crash. Finally, account deleted. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold, Get Rich Education founder, Forbes Real Estate Council member, longtime real estate investor, and host of one of America's longest running real estate investing shows, the Get Rich Education Podcast. Make sure you're listening to that show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen, because it's different content than this. Let's look at what forecasts my peers have made first. What, about 16 other housing analytics platforms have all predicted that home prices will rise next year? And everything we're discussing today is nominal, meaning it's not inflation adjusted. We're talking about the United States. All right, note that the average is a 2.8% gain. And look, I'll tell you now that my forecast today would not even fit on this chart. And this might ramp up your intrigue. It is off the chart, meaning that my forecast that you're getting today is either higher than Goldman Sachs' 4.4% or lower than Moody's Analytics' 0.3%. And today I'll share some charts that you've seen before because they're part of my calculus, and some new charts too. Now, oh gosh, most housing crash predictions fail faster than a New Year's resolution. In fact, before I tell you the future, we need context to put things into perspective. Let's look at just how bad other predictions have been. Yahoo Finance recently pointed this out: the year-by-year reasons that people thought housing prices would crash since 2012. So each of the past 13 years. In 2012, it was shadow inventory coming onto the market. Remember that? 2013, higher mortgage rates. 2014, QE was ending. That's quantitative easing, dollar printing. In 2015, manufacturing recession would make the home prices crash. That's what people thought was going to happen. 2016, well, home prices are back to their pre-global financial crisis high. Some people thought that that sounded shaky. In 2017, no one had a good reason at all. In 2018, mortgage rates went from 4% to 5%. In 2019, home price growth was cooling off. In 2020, people thought the housing market would crash because of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, it was mortgage forbearance. In 2022, it was 7% mortgage rates. I guess it was the first time we saw those in a while. In 2023, people said housing prices would crash due to historically low housing demand. In 2024, it was sustained higher mortgage rates and a smaller uptick in inventory. And then who knows about 2025? Clickbait artists are going to have some other farcical reason about why home prices are going to crash. Well, real estate prices definitely don't always go up. In fact, let's take a crucial look at history. This is the national home price appreciation rate every year since World War II. And as you can see, there were only 2 periods where they fell. Just 1% attrition in 1990, and then the only appreciable loss period were those years around the 2008 global financial crisis. All right, well, how does that awful period compare to now? Well, 2008 is when conditions were largely opposite of what they are now. Back then is when we had an oversupply of homes. And it was all supported by poorly underwritten mortgages, meaning that the borrower really didn't qualify, so then they couldn't make the payment. And then people had low or no equity in homes, so they just walked away. They had no equity or credit score to lose. And that era was so bad and such an anomaly that home prices actually fell below the replacement cost, meaning that you could ostensibly buy existing property for less than the cost that it would take to build one then. I actually was an investor in that period as well, so I could see and feel all of those effects. Well, all three of those conditions are opposite now. We have an undersupply of homes, carefully underwritten mortgages, and record high equity positions, about 300K, so homeowners aren't going to walk away from that. All right, so as we're building up to my factors for the forecast, and then I'll reveal the big percent figure here. To be clear, what I'm providing is the projected sales price of existing single-family homes per the National Association of Realtors stat set. So why existing and not new? Because there are way more existing sales than there are new build sales, and tracking new build actually skews the numbers, because you might have a ton of, say, luxury new build homes built one year that skew the numbers up too much, or then there's the nascent trend of building smaller homes this past year in order to help with affordability, and building smaller skews the numbers as well. So sticking with existing, it allows us to keep things more same. All right, let's get started with the factors that are weighing in to my determination here, which is a great way also for you to learn about what really moves housing prices. And all these factors matter, but what I'll do is generally start with the less weighty factors, and then I'll proceed toward more weighty factors. Trump tariffs. All right, well, could those Trump tariffs increase materials costs that go into homes? Well, yes, of course. Could it increase labor costs too if businesses decide to onshore in order to avoid paying the tariffs? Yes, it sure could. But applying tariffs, that's slow, and it takes a long time to trickle through. We're just looking at 2025 here. Okay, but here's the thing. Even the threat of tariffs can produce inflation, and we already have the threat. See, if you're a consumer that wants to buy a new, say you're looking for a washer dryer set or a microwave, well, you're more motivated to do that today, not in a year, because the threat of tariffs, well, that could mean that its price will spike. So you want to buy your new car now if you anticipate that tariffs could be coming. Well, the apartment building owner feels the same way before he or she buys 48 washer dryer sets for their apartment building, and home builders and remodelers want to get their materials orders in now, whether it's for concrete, drywall, lumber, or really any component that goes into a home where they think that a tariff could soon jack up the price. Trump means inflation, and that correlates with sustained higher interest rates of all kind, including mortgage rates. What about mortgage rates? You know something? They hardly matter. Rates are about 7% now. A lot of experts think they're going to go to 6% in a year, but who really knows? That's really hard to predict. A year ago, everyone thought rates would be way lower today than what they actually are, but it's not just who knows, it's almost who cares about what mortgage rates will be. Since 1994, mortgage rates have risen 1% or more 7 different times. Prices went up all 7 times. Longtime viewers of the channel already know this, so for the complete backstory on why, you can watch the earlier videos here, but higher rates, they are confirmation that the economy is strong. And when an economy is strong and people feel secure in their job, what do they want to do? Buy a home. In fact, a sharp fall in rates correlates with the recession. So higher rates usually lead to higher home prices, and that's something that almost everyone in real estate thinks of oppositely. Well, this year we've seen mortgage rates swing between about 6% and 8%, and you can even see it week by week sometimes. On weeks with lower rates, we had lower housing inventory, and then on weeks with higher rates, we had higher inventory. It did affect that a little, but The next factor is more important than tariffs and mortgage rates, and that is Trump and immigration. All right, because this affects the supply versus demand of housing, something that's really important. More immigrants obviously means more people to house, more housing demand, pushing up prices. On immigration, who really knows how many will be deported? Illegals or others, or none at all? I mean, will Trump deport everyone? It's not easy to do. In fact, here are Trump's latest public remarks on how he's going to treat recent immigrants to the U.S.
You raised the point that the logistics are complicated. You said
Sure
it yourself.
they are, but everything's complicated.
Yeah, you mean you need 24 times more ICE detention capacity just to deport 1 million people per year, not to mention more agents, more judges, more planes. Is it realistic to deport everyone who's here illegally?
You have no choice. First of all, they're costing us a fortune. But we're starting with the criminals, and we got to do it. And then we're starting with others, and we're going to see how it goes.
Well, there, even before Trump's first day in office for his second term, he's already saying he will see how it goes with deporting immigrants. If there is mass deportation, housing demand goes down, but we'd also have fewer laborers to build new housing that our country needs. So there's just somewhat of a canceling effect there. It could mean higher home prices, though, because most fresh immigrants, they are renters. They aren't buying homes for a while anyway. And the Pew Research Center estimates that 13% of construction workers are undocumented. Well, that disruption to the labor market, that can produce higher inflation because a slowdown in home building means less supply and higher prices. All right, now let's get to the biggest factor before I provide the forecast result, and that is head-on housing supply versus demand. Starting with supply, just how undersupplied of housing are we still in the United States? Here's an update on the active listing count. This is basically the number of homes for sale. This is single families, condos, and townhomes. So we are up off the bottom, but we still need 1.5 to 2 million units in order to have an adequate supply in order to meet demand. We are still a good 40% or more below that. All right then, well, let's try to project the future supply by looking at starts then. This great chart shows it all. Shovels in the ground, excavating for footings, starting homes. We don't have enough starts either. Single family is the blue, apartments orange, manufactured housing gray. Not enough. In fact, we could be digging a deeper hole. At our current level of building, U.S. housing undersupply will grow by over 200,000 homes every single year if we continue at this low level of building. And now when you consider all housing types, I mean single family, apartments, condos, mobile homes, everything, Freddie Mac estimates that we are now undersupplied by a whopping 3.7 million housing units. I mean, at 2 persons per home, then our shortage is greater than what could house the entire population of Libya. And some agencies estimate that we're even more undersupplied than 3.7 million homes. And when it comes to supply, this year had historically low home sales. That means the volume of sales. Next year, there will likely only be a few more sales. Now, see, you as a real estate investor and consumer, you're interested in real estate prices. That's what we're talking about here. But the industry, like builders and agents and even furniture providers, they're more concerned about the number of home sales, that is sales volume. And what's normal is about 5 million home sales per year. It was over 6 million during the pandemic, and now we're down at 4 million. So I mean, from 6 million to 4 million, that is a drawdown of transactions by 1/3. So just imagine the peril if you're a home builder or a real estate agent and your volume is down by 1/3. I mean, what would happen to you if your income were down by 1/3? Well, while all that was happening to sales volume, home prices have just kept ticking up these past few years. All right, well, there is just one last factor to weigh in before I reveal the forecast number, and that is demand. there is a long way to go before there is enough housing inventory for the pent-up demand in the market. Demographics is destiny. It's one of the easiest things to project because it is known. All right, let's just forget immigration here for a moment. Domestically, the US had its own high birth rate years from 1990 to 2010. A lot of people don't realize that. Many of those years, there were over 4 million births that peaked in the year 2007. And now you might be wondering, okay, well, that's the past. What about the future? Well, in housing prices and demographics, that is the future, because with today's first-time home buyer now being a record 38 years old, if you add that to when they were born, 2007, well, that home buyer demand won't even peak until 2045. So that's a big part of where the demand is coming from and is going to keep coming from. The wave of demand that might not slow until the 2050s. And what could slow prices, though, is if a major recession that included a lot of job losses is imminent. No one expects that. And you know something super interesting? On future demand, what if health and fitness influencer Brian Johnson is right, and Earth now has the first generation not to die? What would that do to real estate prices? That would really expand housing demand. All right, well, understand that it's hard to know the future, and I've made all of these forecasts at the end of one year, just before the forecast year even starts. And here's how I've done. Here's my track record. For 2022, I forecast 9 to 10% home price appreciation. The year ended, they came in at 10%. For 2023, I forecast 0%, and so many people were calling for a housing price decline that year. The year ended, and they came in at 0%. And all of this is published and on record. For 2024, you can hear the forecast that I made near the end of last year. For this year, that's in this video right here. That's where you'll see that back then, for this year, I forecast 4%. This year is not quite over and housing data lags somewhat, but found through this NAR page, which we'll link below, you can see that late in the year, they are really close to 4%. It's going to be very likely that they do end up at 4% this year, just like I had forecast at the end of last year, but I don't want to take credit for that quite yet. It's still to be determined here, technically. And that leads us to the forecast for next year. Really, the short story and why I've come up with this number is that I expect more buyers than homes, which creates bids and buoyant prices. And I also expect continued inflationary pressure. Really, those are the two chief factors that went into this. And we don't revise our forecast mid-year. This is it. For 2025, I expect the national median single-family home price to increase by 5%. Yes, there it is, 5% projected appreciation for next year. So at Christmas or your next dinner party, when you see your brother-in-law that thinks the housing market is always going to crash, give him a hug and a turkey leg and pass me the wishbone for good luck for our fourth consecutive housing price appreciation forecast, with what looks like me really nailing the forecasts spot on each of the previous 3 years. I have to concede that there probably is a little luck that's come into play here. Once again, this is my best estimate, and I do study the housing market a lot. I mean, this is what I do, and a streak like this cannot go on forever. What I've given you is what I can best surmise. But I really hope that this helps with planning your own portfolio moves, whether that's you owning more income property or a refinancing, or how you think about your own home. If you want to hear more, like I said earlier, I talk about how to take this information and use it to actionably build wealth for yourself, where I host one of America's longest running and most listened to real estate investing shows, the Get Rich Education audio podcast. So make sure you're listening to that show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen, because it's different than this content. It is about accountability. Check out last year's much shorter video where I told you about what to expect in the housing market this year.